I never had that special sisterly bond you see in movies or read about in books. Jessica was already 10 years old when I came along, practically a different generation. While she was experiencing her first crushes in high school, I was still playing with dolls. Our parents, like many who have children far apart, seem to hold a special place in their hearts for their firstborn. Jessica could do no wrong in their eyes, and that pattern continued well into our adult years. When I turned 18 and started college in our hometown, Jessica was getting married to David, a local accountant she'd met at church. I remember her wedding day clearly. She was glowing with happiness, and our parents couldn't stop crying tears of joy. I was just relieved I could live at home while attending college, to save money. Little did I know what that decision would cost me. Jessica wasted no time settling into her role as a housewife. Within months of the wedding, she announced her pregnancy. "Isn't it wonderful, Robin?" she gushed. "You're going to be an aunt." I smiled and nodded, not realizing this announcement would completely derail my college experience. 3 months after little Tommy was born, Jessica started showing up at our parents' house unannounced. "I just need a break," she'd say, practically throwing Tommy into Mom's arms. "I'll be back in a few hours. Robin's home anyway, she can help." I'd be in my room, surrounded by textbooks and notes, when Mom would knock on my door. "Robin, honey, could you watch Tommy while I make dinner?" It became a daily routine. My study time was constantly interrupted by a crying baby and my mother's gentle, but persistent requests for help. I tried to balance everything, but it was exhausting. Then, just when I thought I had somewhat adjusted to the situation, Jessica dropped another bombshell during Sunday dinner. "We're having another baby," she announced. "Tommy's going to be a big brother." 2 years later, I was in my final year of college, trying desperately to prepare for my exams while dealing with both 3-year-old Tommy running wild through the house and baby Michael screaming at the top of his lungs. "Jessica," I said one afternoon, after she'd dropped both kids off so she could go to the movies with her friends, "have you considered hiring a babysitter?" She looked at me like I'd suggested she sell her children. "Do you know how expensive babysitters are these days?" she scoffed. "Besides, why should we pay someone when we have family who can watch them for free?" Our mother, who was currently chasing Tommy as he ran through the house with her reading glasses, just nodded absently. Of course she didn't mind. Jessica was her precious firstborn, and she'd never deny her anything. Meanwhile, our house had turned into complete chaos. Tommy treated every room like his personal playground, leaving a trail of destruction wherever he went. One morning, I woke up to find he'd emptied all my college folders onto the floor and used my notes as drawing paper. Baby Michael's piercing screams provided a constant soundtrack to the mayhem. "Robin," Mom called out one afternoon, her voice strained. "Please come help with the boys. I can't handle them anymore today." I heard something crash downstairs, followed by Tommy's gleeful giggling. "I can't, Mom," I shouted back through my locked door. "I have finals next week." "You're being selfish." Dad's voice joined the chaos. "These are your nephews. Family helps family." I turned up my music to drown out their voices and the sound of another crash downstairs. My hands were shaking as I highlighted important passages in my textbook. I felt guilty, but I also knew that if I didn't pass these exams, my whole future would be affected. The next few weeks were tense, but I managed to graduate with honors despite the constant disruptions. My first priority after securing a job at Anderson & Associates was finding my own place. The starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small one-bedroom apartment across town. That first night in my apartment was the most peaceful I'd experienced in years. No screaming, no crying, no chaos, just blessed silence. 2 years passed, and I'd managed to create a comfortable life for myself. Then came the news of Jessica's third pregnancy. "It's another boy," Mom told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "Isn't it wonderful?" "Yeah, wonderful," I said, already imagining the increased chaos. "How are you and Dad handling Tommy and Michael these days?" Mom sighed. "They're energetic. Jessica still brings them over every weekend. Says she needs a break. Now with another baby coming. Her voice trailed off, and I could hear the exhaustion she was trying to hide. During my next visit home, I found my parents looking older than their years. Tommy and Michael were racing through the house, playing some game that seemed to involve throwing all the couch cushions on the floor. Jessica had just dropped them off before heading to brunch with friends. "Mom, Dad," I said carefully, watching them chase after the boys, "you know you don't have to do this, right? You can say no to Jessica." Dad turned to me, his face red with either exertion or anger. "That's such a selfish thing to say, Robin. This is what family does." "There's nothing selfish about setting boundaries," I argued. "You both look exhausted." "You don't understand what family means," Mom snapped, even as she picked up another cushion from the floor. "You've never understood. When you have children of your own, you'll get it." I left their house that day feeling frustrated and sad. It seemed like nothing had changed. Jessica was still taking advantage, our parents were still enabling her, and I was still the bad guy for pointing out the obvious. Over time, my weekend visits home became increasingly difficult to endure. Each time I walked through my parents' door, I found myself stepping into what felt like a war zone. Tommy, now 5, and Michael, 3, had developed a particularly nasty habit of turning mealtimes into food fights, with 6-month-old Kevin, their youngest brother, usually ending up as their unwilling target. One Sunday lunch was especially horrible. I watched in horror as Tommy loaded his spoon with mashed potatoes and launched it across the table at Michael, who retaliated with a handful of green peas. Kevin, caught in the crossfire, ended up with baby food dripping down his face, sobbing while his older brothers laughed. I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough." I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. "Tommy, Michael, get over here right now." They stared at me, unused to being confronted. "Look at this mess you've made," I pointed to the food-splattered floor and walls. "And look at your brother crying. This is unacceptable. You're going to clean this up, now." To everyone's surprise, including my own, they actually started cleaning. Maybe it was the shock of someone finally standing up to them. That's when Jessica burst through the door, returning from her weekly spa appointment. "What's going on here?" she demanded, seeing her older boys on their hands and knees wiping the floor. "They made a mess at lunch," I explained. "They're cleaning it up." Jessica's face turned red. "How dare you? They're just children. You're being cruel to them." "Cruel?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jessica, they were throwing food at Kevin. He was crying. This isn't okay behavior." "You don't have children," she spat. "You don't understand anything." I looked at our parents, hoping they'd back me up, but they just sat there, looking tired and defeated. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't stand up to Jessica, why they kept letting her take advantage of their kindness. Life went on like this for 3 more years, with me limiting my visits home to avoid the chaos. Then everything changed when I met James. He was nothing like anyone I'd dated before. Smart, kind, and most importantly, he understood the importance of boundaries. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He'd accidentally taken my latte, and we ended up talking for hours. After 6 months of dating, we introduced each other to our families. His parents, Robert and Diana, were lovely people who raised their voices about as often as they burned dinner, which was never. The contrast between their peaceful home and my parents' chaos was striking. Christmas had always been a big deal in our family, and this year was supposed to be extra special since James and I were newly engaged. Mom went all out with the decorations. The tree was beautiful, presents were wrapped perfectly in matching paper, and the house smelled amazing with all her holiday baking. When James and I arrived early to help, the atmosphere was festive and warm. My cousins Mark and Sarah were already there with their kids, who were quietly playing board games in the corner. Several of our relatives had traveled from out of town, including Great-Aunt Martha, who immediately pulled me into a tight hug. "Let me see that ring, dear," she said, admiring my engagement ring. "James is such a lovely young man. You two will be so happy together." Everything was picture perfect. Mom had outdone herself with the food, Dad was telling his favorite stories, and even the kids were well behaved, saying please and thank you when offered cookies. It felt like a scene from a Christmas movie. Then the front door burst open. "Merry Christmas!" Jessica's voice rang out, but it was immediately drowned by the sound of her 3 boys storming into the house like a hurricane. Tommy, now 8, immediately ran straight into Great Uncle George, nearly knocking him over. Michael, 6, started chasing his cousins, who had been quietly reading on the couch. 3-year-old Kevin was screaming at the top of his lungs, for no apparent reason. "Boys will be boys," Jessica laughed, while her husband David stared at his phone, completely checked out of the situation. Before anyone could stop them, Tommy and Michael discovered the presents under the tree. They didn't just look at them or shake them, they started ripping them open. All of them. Even the ones that weren't for them. "Oh my goodness," Great Aunt Martha gasped as Tommy tore through a carefully wrapped package meant for my cousin's daughter. "I think I need to leave. This is too much excitement for me." She wasn't the only one. Within 20 minutes, half of our elderly relatives had made their excuses and left, unable to handle the chaos that my nephews were creating. The dinner that followed was even worse. My cousin's children sat quietly, using their napkins and waiting their turns to speak. In stark contrast, my nephews turned the dinner table into a battlefield. Tommy and Michael were throwing dinner rolls at each other across the table, while Kevin was smearing cranberry sauce in his hair. "Children, please," Mom pleaded weakly, but they ignored her completely. The breaking point came when Tommy, with a mischievous grin, deliberately picked up his can of soda and poured it all over Mom's special Christmas pie, the one she'd spent hours making that morning. "Tommy," several voices shouted at once. But Jessica just laughed. "He's just being playful," she said, while David continued scrolling on his phone. I looked around the table at my relatives' faces, the shock, the disapproval, the discomfort, while my sister and her husband sat there acting like this was perfectly normal behavior. I couldn't take it anymore. The sight of my mother's ruined pie, the chaos, the complete lack of discipline, it was all too much. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I can't stay here," I announced, my voice shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous. Your children are behaving disgustingly, Jessica, and you're doing nothing about it." The table fell silent, except for the sound of Kevin banging his spoon against his plate. Jessica's face turned red. "Oh, that's rich coming from you," she snapped. "You don't have children, Robin. You have no idea how hard it is to raise kids. When you have your own, then you can judge my parenting." I let out a bitter laugh and gestured toward my cousin's children, who were sitting quietly, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Really? Then how do you explain them? Sarah and Mark's kids have been perfectly well behaved all day. They use their manners, they don't destroy things, they don't throw food. How is that possible if children are supposedly impossible to control?" "Those kids are just different," Jessica sputtered. "No, the difference is that Sarah and Mark actually parent their children," I shot back. "When was the last time you made your kids face any consequences for their actions?" Jessica's eyes welled up with tears. "You're so cruel. You've always hated my children." "I don't hate them," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I hate watching them grow up without any guidance or discipline. I hate seeing Mom and Dad's house destroyed every time you visit. I hate that you think this behavior is normal." James stood up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I think we should go," he said quietly. Jessica was full-on crying now, while her boys continued their chaos, completely unfazed by the drama unfolding around them. David finally looked up from his phone, seeming mildly annoyed by the disruption. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. "Sorry, Mom, but I just can't watch this anymore." James and I left to the sound of Jessica's sobs and Tommy's triumphant yell as he launched another dinner roll across the room. 2 months later, we were sitting in our apartment, working on the wedding guest list. The Christmas disaster was still fresh in our minds as we looked at the names. We can't invite the boys, I said finally, voicing what we were both thinking. They'll ruin everything. Can you imagine them during the ceremony? During the reception? James nodded. What if we just make it completely child-free? No kids under 16, period. That way it's not personal, it's just a blanket policy. You don't think people will be offended? Some might be, he admitted. But if it applies to everyone equally, it's harder to argue with. Sarah and Mark might be disappointed their kids can't come, but at least they'll understand it's not targeted at them specifically. I thought about the peaceful ceremony we'd been planning. No chaos, no food fights, no screaming children. Just an elegant celebration of our love, surrounded by mature guests who could actually appreciate the moment. A child-free wedding, I repeated, trying out the words. You know what? I actually love it. I chose a Sunday afternoon to break the news to my family. In retrospect, maybe I should have done it when Jessica and her kids weren't there, but finding them absent from our parents' house was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. As soon as I walked in, I had to dodge a remote control flying through the air, thrown by Tommy while chasing Michael. Kevin was crying on the floor because his brothers had knocked over his blocks for the third time. Mom, Dad, I started, raising my voice over the chaos. Jessica, I need to talk to you all about the wedding. Sure, honey, Mom said, trying to clean up juice that Kevin had spilled on the carpet. I took a deep breath. James and I have decided to make the wedding child-free. No children under 16 will be attending. The chaos stopped for approximately 2 seconds before Jessica erupted. What? She screamed, jumping up from the couch. You can't do that. What about my boys? The policy applies to all children, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. Not just yours. This is because you hate them. Jessica was turning red now, her voice getting louder with each word. You've always hated my children. You're a horrible aunt, a horrible sister. No, I love your boys, I insisted, even as Tommy chose that moment to knock over a vase. But you saw what happened at Christmas. The food fights, the presents being torn open, the ruined pie. That was just kids being kids. No, Jessica, it wasn't. Mark and Sarah's kids were there too, remember? They didn't destroy anything. They didn't ruin Christmas for everyone else. Oh, here we go again with the perfect cousin's perfect children, Jessica screamed. Well, you know what? You won't have to worry about my disruptive children at your precious wedding, because we won't be there at all. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. That's your choice, I said quietly. If you'd rather not come to my wedding than attend without your children, that's up to you. Jessica stared at me for a moment, her mouth open in shock. Then she started gathering her kids' things, shoving toys into bags. Come on, boys, she yelled. We're leaving. Your Aunt Robin doesn't want you in her life anymore. That's not what I said, I started, but she was already herding the boys toward the door. I hope you're happy with your perfect, quiet wedding, she spat over her shoulder. Then she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. After Jessica stormed out, I turned to my parents, expecting to find understanding in their faces. After all, they'd been dealing with my nephew's chaos for years. Instead, I found them looking at me with disappointment. How could you, Robin? Mom's voice was quiet but sharp. Those are your nephews. Mom, you've seen how they behave, I said, incredulous. You saw what happened at Christmas. They're just children, Dad jumped in. You're being incredibly selfish. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? How is it selfish to want my wedding day to be peaceful? One day that I want to be perfect, without food fights or screaming or chaos. Dad's face hardened. Then you need to reconsider your decision. Either invite your nephews, or we won't be attending either. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at their faces, these parents who had watched their house be destroyed countless times, who looked older than their years from the stress of handling 3 unruly boys, who were now threatening to miss their younger daughter's wedding because she wanted one peaceful day. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. That's your choice. Don't come. I left their house and drove straight to James's place. When I told him and his parents what had happened, they immediately rallied around me. You're absolutely right to want a peaceful wedding, Diana, my future mother-in-law, assured me. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that. That evening, I made it official. I posted the announcement on Facebook. James and I are excited to announce that our wedding will be a child-free celebration. We look forward to sharing our special day with our adult guests in an elegant, peaceful atmosphere. The support was overwhelming. Cousins, friends, and even distant relatives liked and commented with their approval. Sarah, my cousin, wrote, "Completely understand. We'll arrange a sitter for the kids. Can't wait to celebrate with you." Then Jessica commented, "Shame on you, Robin. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness. You've always been jealous of my children and now you're excluding them from this important family event. I hope you're happy with yourself." The response was immediate and unexpected. Relatives who had witnessed the Christmas disaster jumped to my defense. "Jessica, your kids destroyed the Christmas celebration," Aunt Linda wrote. "They ruined presents that weren't theirs, threw food, and drove half the family to leave early. Maybe instead of attacking Robin, you should focus on teaching your children how to behave in public," Great Aunt Martha chimed in. Comment after comment appeared, each one recounting another instance of my nephew's bad behavior and Jessica's lack of parenting. The post turned into a catalog of years of chaos and destruction, all of which Jessica had dismissed or ignored. Jessica's responses stopped abruptly. For once, she had nothing to say in defense of her children's behavior, perhaps because, for the first time, she was facing unified opposition from the entire family. My phone rang 3 days after the Facebook post explosion. When I saw Mom on the caller ID, my stomach tightened, but I answered anyway. "Robin?" Mom's voice was soft. "Your father and we saw your post." And all the comments. We had no idea so many people felt this way. Seeing everyone describe what happened at Christmas, and all the other occasions. "We'll be at your wedding, honey," Dad chimed in. "With or without your sister. You deserve your perfect day." The relief was overwhelming. "Thank you," I managed to say through my tears. "That means everything to me." After that conversation, I sent Jessica and David a formal wedding invitation with a handwritten note. "I would love to have you both there to celebrate with us. I know it's difficult without the boys, but this is important to me. Love, Robin." Weeks passed without a response. As the RSVPs rolled in, Jessica's silence became her answer. The wedding day itself was everything I'd dreamed of. The ceremony was peaceful and elegant, without a single interruption. During the reception, adults could actually have conversations without shouting over chaos. No food was thrown, no decorations were destroyed, no one cried except my mom, happy tears as she watched us exchange our vows. "This is lovely," Great Aunt Martha told me during the reception. "So dignified, so peaceful." James squeezed my hand under the table. He knew I was thinking about the empty seats where Jessica and David should have been. A week after we returned from our honeymoon, Mom called with news. "Jessica hasn't brought the boys over since your wedding," she said. "I tried to call her, but she won't answer." "She's punishing you for coming to my wedding," I said quietly. "Maybe," Mom sighed. "But you know what? For the first time in years, your father and I feel rested. Our house is still clean at the end of the day. Maybe this isn't entirely a bad thing." I understood what she meant. Sometimes relationships need to break before they can be rebuilt properly. Perhaps this was our family's breaking point, the moment when we finally stopped pretending everything was fine and acknowledged the problems that had been growing for years. I still hope that one day Jessica will understand that my wedding wasn't about excluding her children, it was about having one day of peace. I hope she'll realize that her boys' behavior isn't normal or acceptable, and that letting them run wild isn't doing them any favors. I hope that someday we can rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Until then, I have my memories of a perfect wedding day, surrounded by people who understood and supported my choice. I have my new husband and his loving family. And I have the knowledge that sometimes standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult, even when it hurts, is the right thing to do. I never thought fairy tales could come true until I got my own evil stepmother. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Ashley, and my early childhood was what most would consider normal, even privileged. My parents were successful business people, living in a beautiful two-story house in Connecticut. Dad worked hard building his company from the ground up, while Mom had her own priorities. She was rarely home, always out with her friends, especially her best friend Diana. They were inseparable, getting their nails done, having long lunches at fancy cafes, shopping at expensive boutiques. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework alone while Dad heated up another microwave dinner. "Where's Mom?" I'd ask, though I already knew the answer. "She's out with Diana again, sweetheart," Dad would say, trying to hide his disappointment. "But hey, how about we make this dinner special? I bought your favorite ice cream for dessert." That was Dad, always trying to fill both roles, to make everything okay. But even his best efforts couldn't prevent what happened when I was 9. I still remember that day with painful clarity. Mom came home late, as usual, but instead of sneaking up to her room, she called for a family meeting. "I'm leaving," she announced, her voice eerily calm. "I've fallen in love with someone else. We're moving to Europe next month. You can keep full custody of Ashley." Just like that, my mother erased herself from my life. She packed her things the next day and disappeared, leaving behind a shell-shocked father and a confused 9-year-old girl who couldn't understand why she wasn't enough for her own mother. That's when Diana started coming around more often. At first, I was glad to see her. She was familiar, a connection to my mom. She'd cook dinner for us, help me with my homework, and clean the house. She was everything Mom hadn't been. Dad seemed to brighten whenever she was around. Within months, they started dating, and 6 months after Mom left, Dad announced they were getting married. I remember feeling relieved. Diana had been so kind, so attentive. Maybe this was the mother figure I'd been missing. "Are you happy about this, Ashley?" Dad asked me after he told me about the engagement. "Yes," I said, nodding enthusiastically. "Diana's nice. She takes care of us." The wedding was beautiful, and Diana looked perfect in her white dress. She hugged me during the reception and whispered, "We're going to be such a happy family." I believed her. God, how I believed her. While they were on their honeymoon, I stayed with my grandmother, Dad's mom. Those were the last truly peaceful days I would have for a very long time. The day I returned from Grandma's house, I knew something was different the moment I walked through the door. Diana was sitting at the kitchen table, her posture rigid, hands folded neatly in front of her. Dad was there too, looking uncomfortable. "Ashley," Diana said, her voice lacking its usual warmth, "we need to talk about some changes." I sat down, still wearing my backpack from Grandma's. Dad shifted in his chair, not meeting my eyes. "Your father and I have been discussing your upbringing," Diana continued, her eyes fixed on me. "I've noticed some concerning similarities between you and your mother." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "The way you act, your attitude, it's clear you need more structure. More discipline." She turned to Dad. "Don't you agree, honey? We don't want her turning out like her mother." I watched Dad's face carefully. He frowned slightly, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, maybe some structure would be good." "I'll handle everything," Diana quickly assured him, patting his hand. "You're so busy with work, darling. Let me take care of this." And just like that, my life changed. The next day, Diana laid out her new rules. First came the changes to my wardrobe. "We'll only be shopping at sales from now on," she announced. "Designer clothes are a waste of money for a growing girl." But that was just the beginning. The following weekend, when Dad usually gave me my weekly allowance, Diana intercepted. About your pocket money, she said, her voice sickly sweet. From now on, you'll have to earn it. Straight A's only. 1B, and no allowance for the week. But Dad always, I started to protest. Your father agrees with me, she cut me off. Don't you, dear? Dad, buried in his work laptop, just nodded absently. Listen to Diana, Ashley. She knows what's best. The rules got stricter with each passing week. Diana started keeping a notebook, a detailed record of my every transgression. One morning, I rushed to school without making my bed. It went in the notebook. A glass left on the counter instead of being put in the dishwasher? In the notebook. Homework completed but not filed properly in my folder? Another mark. Every Friday, she'd sit me down and go through the list. Bed unmade on Monday, dishes left out on Wednesday, room not vacuumed on Thursday. She'd read with cold satisfaction. Well, it looks like no pocket money this week either. Maybe next week you'll try harder. I watched my previous life slip away, replaced by endless rules and restrictions. The worst part wasn't even the rules themselves, it was how she'd transformed from the warm, caring woman who'd helped with my homework into this cold, calculating figure who seemed to take pleasure in finding my faults. And my father, the man who used to be my biggest defender, had become a silent observer, too busy with work to notice what was happening in his own home. I tried talking to Dad multiple times about Diana's rules, catching him on rare moments when he wasn't buried in work. Dad, can we talk? I approached him one evening in his home office. He barely looked up from his computer screen. What is it, Ashley? I'm really busy right now. It's about Diana, and all these rules. Don't you think they're a bit excessive? He finally stopped typing and sighed. Look, honey, I know things are different now, but Diana's doing all the hard work around here. She's managing the household while I'm trying to keep the business running. We should appreciate that. But Dad. Not now, Ashley. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. Thank God for Grandma. She was the only one who saw through Diana's perfect stepmother act. During one of her visits, she overheard Diana berating me for leaving a textbook on the coffee table. This is ridiculous, Grandma exploded. She's a child, not a soldier in boot camp. The argument that followed was explosive. Diana played the victim perfectly, crying to Dad about how his mother was undermining her parenting. Your mother doesn't respect my position in this family, she sobbed. How can I raise Ashley properly with her constantly interfering? Dad, as usual, took Diana's side. The fight with Grandma was ugly. If you can't support my wife, he told her, maybe you should stop coming around for a while. Just like that, Grandma's regular visits stopped. But I found my way to her house after school whenever I could. She lived just 15 blocks away, and those visits became my sanctuary. Don't let her break your spirit, sweetheart, Grandma would say, slipping me $20. Hide this where she won't find it. I became an expert at hiding things, money, small gifts from Grandma, even my emotions. I had a loose floorboard under my bed where I kept my secret stash. Every time Diana's inspections got more intense, I'd touch that floorboard, reminding myself I had at least one person in my corner. Then came the conversation that changed everything. I was 15, heading to the kitchen for water late one night, when I heard voices from my parents' room. The door was cracked open, and Diana's words stopped me cold. She doesn't deserve to have you pay for her college, Diana was saying. You've seen how she behaves. All that attitude, just like her mother. If you keep pampering her like this, she'll end up exactly the same way, running off and abandoning her family. I held my breath, waiting for Dad to defend me. The silence stretched out painfully. Maybe you're right, he finally said, uncertainty clear in his voice. But we did promise. Promises to ungrateful children need to be reconsidered, Diana pushed. Think about it, darling. We could use that money for our future instead. I didn't stay to hear more. Back in my room, I lay awake for hours, Diana's words echoing in my head. I knew her influence over Dad would only grow stronger. If I wanted a future, I'd have to make it happen myself. That night, I made a decision. I would study harder than ever before. Every free moment would be dedicated to schoolwork. I would get a full scholarship to college if it killed me. The next 2 years became a blur of studying, extracurricular activities, and competitions. I joined every academic club I could find: debate team, science club, math club. My weekends were spent either studying or participating in state competitions. The trophy shelf in my room slowly filled up with awards: first place in the state science fair, top speaker at the regional debate championship, perfect score on the math Olympiad. Diana couldn't stand it. Every achievement, every award seemed to irritate her more. But she couldn't criticize me anymore, not when teachers were calling home to praise my performance, not when local newspapers were featuring my academic achievements. Finally, graduation day arrived. I'd done it, a full scholarship to Marshall University in the neighboring state. The letter had come 2 weeks earlier, and I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell them. I chose dinner after graduation, thinking surely, on this day of all days, even Diana couldn't ruin things. I got into Marshall, I announced, still wearing my graduation gown. Full academic scholarship. Dad's face lit up. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then Diana wrapped her arms around Dad's shoulders, and I watched her face transform into that sickly sweet expression I'd grown to hate. "Oh, honey," she cooed, "this is wonderful news. But you know what would make it even better? If Ashley learned the value of true independence." Dad turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "Well," Diana continued, her voice dripping with false concern, "we shouldn't spoil her too much. The scholarship is great, but maybe she should pay for her own housing? Get a job, learn some responsibility?" I watched in disbelief as Dad nodded slowly. "That actually makes sense." Something inside me snapped. All the years of pent-up frustration, all the silent suffering, everything came pouring out at once. "Makes sense?" I stood up so quickly, my chair fell backward. "Nothing about this makes sense. You've let her control everything for years. She's turned this house into a prison, and you just sit there and nod along with whatever she says." "Ashley," Dad started, but I wasn't finished. "You already had money saved for my college." "I know you did, I heard you talking about it years ago. But let me guess, Diana, you convinced him to spend it on something else, didn't you? Just like you convinced him to stop letting Grandma visit, to stop being my father." Diana's face turned red with rage. "How dare you," she shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "After everything we've done for you. Is this how you show gratitude?" "Gratitude?" I laughed bitterly. "For what? For making my teenage years a living hell? For taking my weekly allowance? See?" Diana turned to Dad, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. "This is exactly what I've been warning you about. She doesn't respect you at all. All she cares about is money, money, money. Just like her mother." I watched Dad's face change, hardening into something I'd never seen before. He stood up slowly, his hands shaking. "Get out," he said quietly. "Diana's right, you've become exactly like your mother. Selfish, ungrateful, only thinking about yourself. I won't have another woman like that in my house. Pack your things and leave." The words hit me like physical blows. Behind Dad's shoulder, I could see Diana's triumphant smirk, quickly hidden behind a hand raised in fake distress. I ran upstairs to my room, tears blurring my vision. My hands shook as I threw clothes into my suitcase, grabbed my awards and photos, and emptied my secret stash from under the floorboard. The whole time, I could hear Diana's voice downstairs, consoling Dad, "It's not your fault, honey. Some people just can't be helped." Grandma's house was only a 15-minute drive away, but it felt like hours. She opened the door, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "He kicked me out," I sobbed into her shoulder. "He said I'm just like Mom." Your father's a fool, she said firmly, helping me with my bags. But you're not going to let them win. You're stronger than that. I stayed with Grandma through the summer, working at a local bookstore to save up money. She helped me research apartments near Marshall University, and when August came, she handed me an envelope. It's not much, she said, but it should cover your first few months' rent. The rest is up to you. College life was hard at first. I found a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford, and got a job as a waitress at a cafe near campus. My schedule was brutal: morning classes, afternoon study sessions in the library, evening shifts at the cafe, then homework until midnight. But it was worth it. Every time I felt like giving up, I remembered Diana's smirk, and it gave me the energy to keep going. The years passed quickly. I made friends, earned top grades, and slowly built a new life for myself. My phone never rang with calls from home, not on birthdays, not on holidays, not even when I made the dean's list every semester. The only connection to my old life was Grandma, who called every Sunday without fail. After graduation, I was offered a position at Anderson & Mitchell, one of the top consulting firms in the city. The starting salary was more than enough for me to afford a nice one-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. I framed my diploma and hung it next to my job offer letter, tangible proof that I'd made it on my own. I met Mike at a coffee shop near my office. It was such a cliché. I literally bumped into him while rushing to get my morning latte, spilling his drink all over his suit. I insisted on buying him a new one, and somehow that turned into dinner that evening. Mike was different from anyone I'd ever met, kind, genuine, and completely devoted to his family. Meeting his parents showed me what a real, loving family looked like. After a year of dating, Mike took me to that same coffee shop where we'd met. He got down on one knee right there, pulling out a beautiful diamond ring. "Ashley," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "will you marry me?" I said yes through tears of joy, and the entire coffee shop erupted in applause. Later that evening, I posted a photo of us on Instagram, me showing off the ring, Mike kissing my cheek, both of us grinning like idiots. The call came exactly 1 week later. I was at work when an unknown number flashed on my phone. Something made me answer it. "Hello, Ashley," the voice sent chills down my spine. "It's been a while." "Diana?" My hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get my number?" "Oh, I have my ways," she laughed softly. "I saw your engagement announcement. Quite a lovely ring. You must be so excited to plan the wedding. What do you want?" "To help, of course." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "You know, every bride deserves to have her father walk her down the aisle." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a deal, dear. A simple transaction, really. $25,000, and I'll convince your father to reconcile with you. I'll make sure he's there to walk you down the aisle on your big day." I felt sick. "And if I refuse?" "Well," she chuckled, "let's just say your father won't be attending the wedding. You know how he is, he does everything I say. I manage all our money, and that fool doesn't even question where it goes." She kept talking, her voice growing more smug with each word. "Remember when I convinced him to kick you out? So easy. Men are such simple creatures, really. A few tears, the right words at the right time. Your father's particularly stupid that way." My hand was shaking, but not from fear. With my other hand, I'd already pulled up the voice recorder app on my work phone and hit record. Diana's voice kept flowing, detailing years of manipulation and deceit. "So what do you say, dear? 25,000 is a small price to pay for a father's love, isn't it?" I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "I need to think about it." "Don't think too long. The offer expires in a week." She hung up with a click. I sat at my desk, staring at the recording on my phone. 7 minutes and 32 seconds of Diana revealing her true nature. 7 minutes and 32 seconds that could change everything. That evening, I played the recording for Mike in our apartment. His face darkened with each passing second. "We need to send this to your father right now," he said, reaching for his phone. I put my hand over his. "No, I have a better idea," I smiled, already opening my laptop. She's always been so careful to maintain her perfect image. Let's see how she likes having her true colors shown to the world. I uploaded the recording to my social media accounts with a simple caption: "My stepmother's wedding gift demand, $25,000 to let my father walk me down the aisle. Listen to the end." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had hundreds of shares. Comments flooded in, many from people who knew Diana personally. "I can't believe this is the same woman who leads our church committee. She told me you'd abandoned your family. I'm so sorry I believed her. This explains why she suddenly had that new car last year." The truth about Diana was spreading like wildfire through our small community. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, post by post, share by share. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Can you come home?" His voice sounded rough, like he'd been crying. "Please, Ashley, we need to talk." I drove the 4 hours back to my childhood home the next day. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but something felt different. Diana's expensive SUV wasn't in the driveway. Her prized rose bushes were untended. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He looked older, tired, his hair grayer than I remembered. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he pulled me into a tight hug. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. No sign of Diana. "She's gone," Dad said, answering my unspoken question. "I kicked her out the day after I heard that recording. Filed for divorce the next morning." He slumped into his favorite armchair, looking defeated. "I've been such a fool, Ashley. All these years, I was so blind. The way she manipulated me, turned me against you, against my own mother." His voice cracked. "I believed every lie she told me. I let her destroy our family." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "I threw you out, my own daughter. I chose her over you. How can you ever forgive me?" I sat on the arm of his chair, like I used to do when I was little. "I forgive you, Dad." He looked up, surprised. "But," I continued, "I need time. We can't just pretend those years didn't happen. We need to rebuild our relationship, slowly." The next 6 months were a journey of healing. Dad and I started with weekly phone calls, awkward at first, but gradually becoming more natural. We met for coffee every other weekend, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Mike joining us. Grandma started visiting the house again, and watching Dad rebuild his relationship with her helped me believe in second chances. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings moved forward. Diana tried to fight for half of everything, but Dad's lawyer used the recording as evidence of her manipulation and deceit. In the end, she got far less than she'd hoped for. She moved out of state, and rumors said she was already looking for her next victim. But we never heard from her again. Dad started therapy, working through his guilt and understanding how he'd let himself be manipulated for so long. During one of our coffee meetings, he told me something that finally helped me understand those lost years. "After your mother left," he said, stirring his coffee absently, "I was so scared of failing you that I let someone else take control. I thought I was protecting you, but instead, I was just running away from my responsibilities as a father." The wedding planning brought us even closer. Dad insisted on helping with everything, from venue hunting to taste testing cakes. He even joined Mike's family for the rehearsal dinner, fitting in perfectly with their warm, boisterous dynamic. On the morning of my wedding, Dad arrived early at the bridal suite. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his hands were shaking as he knocked on the door. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I was already in my dress, Grandma putting the finishing touches on my veil. "I've been ready for this moment my whole life, Dad." He took my hand, and we stood waiting behind the church doors. The wedding march began to play. "Ashley," he whispered, "I know I missed so many important moments in your life. But I promise you, I'm here for all the ones to come." The doors opened, and we started down the aisle. I saw Mike waiting at the altar, beaming. I saw our friends and family smiling, Grandma in the front row already dabbing at her eyes. But mostly, I felt my father's arm steady and strong beneath my hand, finally being the support I'd always needed him to be. At the altar, when the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Dad's voice rang out clear and strong, "Her grandmother and I do." Later, during the reception, I watched Dad dancing with Grandma, both of them laughing like I hadn't seen in years. Mike came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Happy?" he asked. I leaned back against him, taking in the scene before me, my family, broken and rebuilt, stronger at the mended places. More than I ever thought possible. People say you can't choose your family, but that's not entirely true. Sometimes you have to lose your family to find it again. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about everything being perfect, but about learning to love the imperfect pieces and building something new from them. Diana's been gone from our lives for months now, and good riddance. But in a way, I'm almost grateful for what happened. Without the darkness she brought, I might never have learned how strong I could be, might never have experienced the joy of rebuilding what was broken.